Hey, Riley. Can you hear me okay? Hey, Lily.
Hey,
How are you?
good. How are you?
Good. Uh, is there a particular place that you guys would like me to start? Y'all kind of want me to start from the back and work my way forward?
That sounds good to me.
Would that be the part that seems a little more
Yeah.
okay. All right. Then I will do that. Riley, can you hear us okay? Or can you type to me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good. Just wanted to make sure you were there.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to start from the back and work my way forward. And then I was trying to do something new, and I'm not sure. I think I'll just stick with this way. The Cami software's been locking up lately, so it's kind of been hard to do Math Lab. But I'm gonna start with number 60. I've got k squared. I'm going to put this in standard form because that's the very first thing you want to do. And our instructions are solve each equation with a quadratic formula, but you really can't use the quadratic formula until everything's in standard form. So I've got k squared, and then I'm going to move the 4k and the minus 4 over to the other side. But basically, in order to do that, I have to you can't just move it. You actually have to do the opposite of the operation.
Okay.
So in order to get the 4k over, I have to subtract 4k. And then that's going to give me k squared minus 4k equals negative 4. And to get this 4 over, I have to add 4 to both sides. So that gives me 0 on that side. And so now it is in standard form, and it's k squared minus 4k plus 4. And I think I'm going to try to pull up a blank. I'm trying anyway. Wish they made this easier. Ugh. I want to open a blank document so I can just write on it, but I'm going to see. Can y'all see this?
Yes,
You
yeah.
you can?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I was switching to something else and it didn't look like it showed up. Ugh. Because I'm running out of room on this when I write on it. So that's why I was trying to bring it to something else. Just get a blank piece of paper, and the struggle is real. Please let it be. Okay, good. That's what I was trying to do. Because I was, love you, baby. Be careful. I think that was the original problem. Is that correct?
I think it was.
Okay. So I subtracted 4k. And then I got k squared minus 4k equals -4 because those canceled. And now I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So then I have k squared minus 4k plus 4 equals 0. So now this is in standard form. And that's the very first thing that you need to do, because you cannot use the quadratic formula unless the equation is in standard form. Do you guys both have that pretty well nailed down? Okay. So now we're going to identify A, B, and C. And I recommend that you do this on the final. So what would A be?
1.
Yes. And what would B be?
-4.
-4. And C?
4.
Good job. Y'all did great. Okay, so now what we're going to do is plug it into the quadratic formula, which is -b plus or minus the square root of b squared, that whole thing. So the negative b, or opposite of b, means it's going to be the opposite of -4. And the opposite of -4 is 4 plus or minus the square root of -4 squared minus 4 times A, which in this case is 1, times C, which is 4, all over 2A. So we'll have 4 plus, oops, I did something. This needs to be a 1 because that's what A is in this case. So 4 plus or minus, and now we've got -4 squared, which is 16, minus, and then we've got 4 times 1, which is 4, and 4 times 4 is 16. So we've got 16 minus 16 there, all over 2. So this is going to be 4 plus or minus, and 16 minus 16 is 0, and the square root of 0 is 0. Does that make sense to you guys?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, so then you have 4 plus or minus 0, which that's not going to make any difference either way. If you subtract 0 or you add 0, it's still going to be 4. So your one and only answer, which that's pretty unusual, is 2. But that basically means, so that's going to be letter B. Did you all get that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Had you already worked this one out?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Is this just helping go over it to confirm your answers and your confidence?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. You know, I have another review too. If did either of you pick that one up?
I think I may have in study hall.
Okay. So if you need fresh problems, we can also do that. All right. Well, let's do 59. It looks like 58 is going to be our hardest one, but I don't remember. Did it come out even? I can't remember.
I got a mixed number as one of mine.
Oh, okay. Did you get this? B?
Yes.
Okay. All right. But I'll definitely work them out. Hey, if I go to this blank screen, will one of you mind reading me the problem once I get this erased?
Okay. 59.
Yes. Ugh. Is there another particular one? Are y'all glad that we're going through the quadratic equation ones? Or is there other ones that are more confusing to you? Lily? Was this a good place to start?
Yeah.
Okay. Are these the hardest ones for you, sweetheart?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Number 59 is what?
3n squared
3n squared
plus 2
plus 2
equals negative 5n.
equals negative 5n. Okay, in order to get this in standard form, I need to move this 5n over. So I have to do the opposite of what it is, which it's saying minus 5n. So I want to add 5n to both sides. And in order for it to be in standard form, I need the 3n squared to go first, the 5n to be second in the second position, and the plus 2 to be in the third or the constant position. Once I have it in standard form, I identify my A, my B, and my C, because you have to have it in standard form before you identify those. And so A in this case is going to be what?
3.
3. And B is
5.
5. And C is
2.
Good job. So now what we're going to do is put it in the quadratic formula, which is going to be the opposite of B. So what's the opposite of 5?
Negative 5.
Negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 5 squared, or B squared, minus 4 times A, which in this case is 3, times C, which is 2. And I think I'm just going to write the quadratic formula here so that y'all understand what I'm actually filling out.
Okay.
And that's all going to be over 2 times A, which is 3. So now we'll just go in and do some of the calculations. So we're just going to go ahead and bring down our negative 5 plus or minus the square root. We have 5 squared, which is 25, minus, and now we've got 4 times 3 times 2, which 4 times 3 is 12, and 12 times 2 is 24. All over 2 times 3, which is 6. And now we have negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 1 over 6. All right, so what is the square root of 1?
1.
Good job. So now we have the negative 5 plus 1, which negative 5 plus 1 is going to be negative 4 over 6, which reduces to negative 2/3. Or we have negative 5 minus 1, which is negative 6 over 6, which equals negative 1. So our answers are negative 2/3 and negative 1, which is B. Are y'all feeling a little more confident?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Have y'all both got the quadratic formula memorized? Do you do the row, row your boat in your head?
No.
Yeah.
So you still don't have it memorized? You don't.
I
I
memorized.
have
I
it
just don't
memorized.
sing the song.
Oh, you just don't sing the song?
I'm the same way as Lily.
Okay. No singing for you two.
I try to remember, then I can't get the tune right.
I can't. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't think I really can either. I have it memorized, but I don't think I sing it to row, row your boat. What finals are y'all, both of y'all taking finals tomorrow?
Yes.
Which ones are you taking tomorrow?
My geography final.
Your
I'm
geography
doing
final?
lit and geography.
Okay, so you're taking two.
Yes.
Okay, and are you taking two on Friday?
No, I exempted science on Friday.
You exempted science. There you go. What did you, and you exempted lit, Lily?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Mo's taking her lit final tomorrow. Y'all don't have Spanish yet, do you?
No, no.
Okay,
Next year.
next year. Okay, so now we're on 58. Okay,
Yeah.
so 5x squared. And what's the next part?
Minus 138
Oh, 138.
equals 7x.
Once again, in order for it to be in standard form, I need to have that 7x over on the left-hand side. The right-hand side needs to equal 0. And you want to do the opposite of whatever the operation is, which here it was positive. So we're going to use minus 7x. So now it gives us 0 on the right-hand side. And over on the left, we have 5x squared minus 7x minus 138. So now we want to identify our A. And even though this isn't going to be anywhere on the final, a place for you to plug in your A, B, and C, I highly encourage both of you to go ahead and do that and identify it.
Okay.
So A is 5. Yeah, Riley, that will really, really help you as far as like kind of, because there's so many moving parts, you guys, to that quadratic formula that it's just best to, not second guess and like just make sure that it's written there,
Yeah. Okay.
and so you confidently can look and identify those numbers. So, so you have 5, and then B is -7. And then C is negative 138. So now we'll plug that back in to the quadratic formula, which once again is the opposite of B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. So the opposite of B in this case, we have a -7. So the opposite of -7 is +7. Plus or minus. And then we have B squared. So that's going to be -7 squared minus 4 times 5 times, -138. All over 2 times 5. So now we have 7 plus or minus 49. Then we've got -4 times 5, which that's a -20. And then a -20 times a -138. So that's going to give us a positive, what is that, 256? Is that right? What is it? 276. What did y'all get? Oh,
I just
I
worked it
was,
out, and then like I didn't
oh,
write 49.
what was way bigger. 2,700. I was only doubling 138. What did you say, Riley? I apologize.
The step that we're doing, and then the next step I combined into one step, so I went immediately to what would be in the square root instead of like adding right away.
Oh, okay. So you went to this right here. So
Yes.
you got this. Did you get this answer?
Yes.
Okay. Lily, have you worked this one out yet?
Yes, but I don't have my packet with me. It's in my mom's car and she's not here. So,
Oh, bless your heart. So are you just rewriting them, honey?
yes, ma'am.
Oh, angel girl. Okay. Well, I got one other thing that you might want to write down as a step at this point. On the final, you want to make sure that, you check it and see if it's a square root before you start to simplify. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, Lily, what I did is I put in my calculator to check if 2,809 was a perfect square, and it is.
How would you check to see if it was a perfect square on your calculator?
Okay, what you would do is I don't have I just did it on my phone calculator. Let me pull the one out that we use. Just to make sure I tell you the steps right. You want to hit second and then square root like the x squared button, which is the x squared, and then you would type in 2809 and then hit enter. And if it comes back and it says like a solid number without having a decimal, that means it's a perfect square.
Okay.
So if it comes back and it gives you a decimal, it means you're going to have to factor it and simplify it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So, but we got the blessing of it being a perfect square, and 53 is it. So now our two possible answers are 7 plus 53, which is 60 over 10, which equals 6, or 7 minus 53, which is negative 46 over 10, which then reduces to 23 over 5, which is the same as, I think in the answer it says 4 3/5. Is that right? Negative 4 3/5, or a positive 6.
Yeah.
Is that right?
4 3/5.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
So B. Okay. So did you get that, Lily, written down? Or get what you need from it?
I get confused on how you get two different answers. That's where I get confused.
Oh, okay. That's a good question. I'm so glad you asked. Okay. Great question. See this plus and minus?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So what you have to do is you have to do 7 plus 53, which gives me 60. And you have to do 7 minus 53, which gives me negative 46.
Oh, okay.
That whole plus minus thing right here is where you get the two answers.
Okay.
So you're taking that opposite of B and you're adding this square root part, and you're taking the opposite of B and subtracting the square root part. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. It's kind of like, when you were doing your others and you're getting the square root and it was plus or minus.
Yeah.
Remember? Like if you had, like, say for instance, we had 7. Oh, let me not do that one. Let me erase all of this so it doesn't get confusing. Because remember, these are quadratic expressions or quadratic functions. And the quadratic function, most of the time, or actually all the time, it's a parabola. but most of the time it's going to cross the x-axis in 2 places. So that's where the 2 answers, it's telling you where it crosses the x-axis. And this plus minus thing that's in the quadratic formula is one way to find the 2 places.
Okay.
And then the other way, you know, when we were doing, and we'll get back to the completing the square, but let's just say we had n squared equals 49, and y'all were finding the answer to it, you would take the square root and you would have n equals plus or minus 7.
Right. Okay.
So that's that. This plus and minus is that same thing as the plus and minus here, because when you're taking the square root of something and there's a variable associated, which there is because there's variables in these equations, that means that you have to think of all the possibilities. And we know that -7 times -7 is positive 49. Just like +7 times 7 is 49. So that would, believe it or not, for this big old thing, the b squared minus 4ac, when you take the square root of that, there's actually 2 possibilities for it also, a positive and -1.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Does that help with the 2 answers?
Yes, ma'am.
Good. That was a great question. For a good question for clarification. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That really, really helps. And also, it gives me another opportunity to kind of explain that this whole reason that we're doing this, all of these are parabolas. And sometimes they cross there, sometimes they cross there, you know, sometimes they cross like that. But then you'll even have them in Algebra 2 where they're way up here. And that's when it becomes imaginary numbers and all that good stuff. But that's where the 2 answers kind of come from, is you're trying to figure out where this parabola is going to cross the x-axis. So that's the whole point of all these fun things that we're doing.
All right.
Would you all like me to do one more quadratic formula one, or would you like me to move on to completing the square?
I'm okay with moving on, but
Okay. How about you, Riley?
I'm going to move on.
You are? So
Yep.
you don't need me to work out that next one. And because I'm happy to, but I feel like y'all are really getting it. So I don't want to, you know, I know everybody has lots of finals and I don't want to waste anybody's time. You know what I'm saying? But I'm happy to do whatever y'all want me to. So why don't I do 55 and 56?
Okay.
Would you all mind reading me 55, or one of you? What is it?
N squared plus 16n.
Plus 16n?
Yes. Minus 70 equals 3.
Equals 30?
3.
Oh, 3. My apologies. Okay. All right. So, little different than with the quadratic formula. Quadratic formula, the very first step is getting it in standard form. This one, you're going to do something, if you want to write this down in your notes to kind of help you remember, you're going to create space to do that completing of the square. And what I mean by that is when we half it, square it, add it, we're dealing with this number here. And so this minus 70 is in our way to half it, square it, add it. So we need to move it over to the other side. So we're almost breaking that standard form. Does that make sense?
yes, Miss Sparks, I'll be right back. My mom asked me to check on something.
Okay. All right. So we're going to cancel those out, because that's going to give us our space. And so now I have that space right here to do the half it, square it, add it. And when we're halving it, squaring it, and adding it, we're dealing with this b term here. So what is half of 16?
8.
8. So half is 8. And now let's square 8.
64.
64. And now we're going to add that 64. And we're going to stick that right here. But whatever we do to one side of the equation, you have to do to the other. So we're going to add that to both sides of the equation. Now, on this next line, so I created the space, and now I've halved it, squared it, and added it, and I've added it to both sides of the equation. But in the midst of doing that, the whole reason that we did that is we wanted to complete the square. And so what we did was we created a perfect square of this. When we halved it and squared it, half of 16 is 8. So that's where you get it. We halved it and we squared it. And now over here, we have to add these together. And I believe we get 137. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the very next step that we're going to do, and do you understand where I get the n plus 8?
Yes.
Okay. So now the very next step is to take the square root of both sides. So the other thing I'm going to do is 137. I'm going to go through my divisibility checks. 137, it's not even, so it's not divisible by 2. 1 plus 3 is 4. 4 plus 7 is 11. So the digits of 137 all added up give me 11, so that's not divisible by 3. It doesn't end in a 5 or a 0, so it's not divisible by 5. And the last two digits, 37, are not divisible by 4, so that means the whole number isn't divisible by 4. And since it's not divisible by 2 or 3, I know it's not divisible by 6. So I ran through a good bit of my divisibility checks. So what that kind of does is it tells me it's really not factorable by much. So I can, and then I could also type that in to find out if it's a perfect square on my calculator, and I know that it's not. So really, on this one, all I'm going to end up doing is taking the square root of both. The square root of n plus 8 squared is n plus 8. And now I have the square root of 137. And Lily, if you're back with us, guess what reappears? Because I have taken the square root of both sides, I have that plus minus thing again.
Ah.
So it keeps rearing its ugly head. But with this one, all you're going to do is now I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides. And this gives me n equals -8 plus or minus, you can write it just like that, the square root of 137. But that gives me both my answers. If I wanted to write them out in longhand, they would look like this. -8 plus the square root of 137, or didn't mean to write an equal, or -8 minus the square root of 137. And those are my two answers. You can write it this way, longhand with both answers, or you can write it this way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So how did you get the 8 for the final answer? The -8?
Okay. That is where we halved it, squared it, and added it. Okay. So unfortunately, you kind of had to step away right at that moment, but we halved 16 because you're always halving that B term.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So what is half of 16?
8.
Okay. So you half it, which is 8. You square it. What is 8 squared?
64.
Okay. So now what I did after I created that space, I added 64, halved it, squared it, added it. And whatever I do to this side of the equation, I have to do to this side of the equation. So then what I'm doing next, what I did, Lily, when I did that, the whole idea of completing the square is that I'm creating a perfect square trinomial, which, remember, when we're dealing with trinomials, which that's what this is, it's a polynomial with 3 terms, n squared plus 16n plus 64. That is this squared. So when you're completing the square, you're creating the square. So whenever you half that b term, that's going to make this n plus 8 squared. Is that making any sense to you?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So the best thing to remember, and a lot of times what I do, as soon as I half it, so like if my half is -8 or -4, or in this case, it was +8, I kind of go ahead and try to go ahead and write down the n plus 8 squared, because I know the whole point of completing the square is to make that square. And then you add these terms, 73 plus 64 is 137. And then I'm going to take the square root of both sides in order to isolate n all by itself. And when I do that, that's how I come up with the rest of the steps. But what I can do is we can do a few more of these. Riley, how are you feeling about these?
I think I'm pretty good with them. But like, that was one of the ones that I had trouble with.
Okay. All right. So doing a few more is only going to make it good and concrete for you. So
yes.
Did you say this area was one of the last things that you were having a little more trouble with?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. There's the completing the square and the quadratic formula, a lot of moving parts, a whole lot. And so you definitely can, there's lots of room for error, but if you just kind of come up with a good format, and both of y'all are very, very, very good at writing out steps. Somebody who's not is really going to struggle with it. So, I mean, the good news is for both of you guys, that's just not an area that you both show your work very, very, very well. So, and that's really half the battle of this. Riley or Lily, would one of you mind reading me the other completing the square? I think, what was it, 50? What number is it?
56.
56. Okay. Would you read it to me, please?
Yes. A squared.
A squared.
Plus 10a.
Plus 10a.
Minus 42.
Minus 42.
Equals -9.
So did I write it correctly?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so once again, we're going to create that space to complete the square. And in order to complete the square, I need to not have a C term on the same side. So I need to get my C term over on the other, because I want to create the perfect C term to make a perfect square. So I'm going to add 42 to both sides. So that's going to create my space, because now I have a squared plus 10a equals, and so now I'm going to add 42 to a -9, which is going to give me 33. Is that what you got too?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Lily, this is that part where you had to step away from us, I think. So I've created that space right here to half it, square it, add it. So, Lily, what's half of 10?
5.
So that's where I can write, because I am actually know for a fact that I'm going to create a perfect square of this binomial here. So I can actually write that if I want to. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Or no? Okay. So what is 5 squared?
25.
So now half it, square it, add it. And whatever I do to one side of the equation, in order to keep the equation balanced, I have to do to the other side of the equation. So 33 plus 25 gives me 58. So that the whole point, and do you remember, like if I wrote out a plus 5 times a plus 5, I would actually get a squared plus 10a plus 25. So that's the whole idea of creating a perfect square, is to is to make a perfect, where I would actually be squaring a binomial. Okay? That's the point behind this. And then the ultimate point is to figure out where this particular parabola crosses the x-axis. Okay? So now the very next step, to get a all by itself, I have to take the square root of both sides. So I actually created a perfect square in order to get a square root. So now I've got a plus 5, because the square root of anything squared is itself. So a plus 5. And then I've got the square root. And once again, this is going to be plus or minus the square root of 58. All right, now, so we'll go through some divisibility checks and factor. I know that 58 is not a perfect square, but I am going to try to factor it. And I think both of you two are factor tree people. So I'm going to do this. Okay, so 58 is, and pairs make squares. So we have a plus 5 equals plus or minus 2. Is that right? Did I factor that right?
I thought you left the.
Did I leave something out?
One of the answers is like 50. The
Oh,
square
it's
root of
29. It's 29. It's not 26. It's 29. I can't multiply and divide. So that's not divisible by 2. I was just thinking it was. So it looks like, oh, please don't do that to me. I thought Cammie was going to lock up, and that's just bad. Okay, so it looks like it's just going to be plus or minus the square root of 58. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you would subtract 5 from both sides, and then that's going to give you a equals -5 plus or minus the square root of 58. So you didn't have to simplify it at all. So once again, there's that plus or minus, Lily. And you can write it out so you can see both answers if you want to. But you don't have to.
Okay, so on these, we don't have to write it out?
You don't have to. I'm doing that so that you can see where the two answers come from. because earlier you asked where did the answers come from, and it has that same plus or minus thing going on that the quadratic formula has.
Okay.
This has that same idea, and it's very much like when you're taking the square root of just a regular number when you're solving for a variable, because there's two possibilities. So you can write it just like I have here, that -5 plus or minus the square root of 58. That's fine with me. Or I think, how does it show in the answer key? I need to go back and look at that. It shows them both written out.
Yeah.
See, here and then here. They're written out. So I don't want you to be confused because they write it out, Lily.
Okay.
Would that be confusing to you?
Just a little, but
That's why I'm trying to write it out on the review.
okay.
Because I write that plus or minus. But see, okay, let's just take a look at answer B. It says -5 plus the square root of 58. And then the other one is -5 minus the square root of 58. And Mrs. Sparks typically, I tell y'all that I'm lazy and I don't do a lot of writing. So Mrs. Sparks normally does it like this. So my plus and minus are right there.
Okay.
They
Okay.
actually write it out. I'm sorry?
I see what you're talking about.
You do? You see it now?
Yes.
See, I tell y'all I'm lazy. And that's so much less writing. But that's where it comes from. That's where that plus and minus are. Now, when you're using the quadratic formula, sometimes it comes out a little differently. Well, actually, yeah. Sometimes it comes out like this also, though. All right. How do y'all feel about completing the square? Should I pull up that other review for a couple more of them?
I feel pretty good about it.
You feel okay? How about you, Riley?
I feel pretty good.
Okay. All right. So on the next part of the review, this is just what you're finding the value of C that completes the square. So basically, you know how I said below, we had to create the space, to do it because it had an equal sign. All you're doing is just finding that C value that does it. So you're going to half the P value. So half of -4 is what?
-2.
-2. And -2 squared is what?
4.
Yep. So your answer would be 4. So what is, for number 52, what is half of 12?
6.
And what is 6 squared?
36.
Okay. And for number 53, half of 22 is?
11.
And 11 squared is?
121.
Yep. And number 54, half of -40 is?
-20.
-20. And -20 squared is?
400.
So there you are. So that's how you do those. All right. Solve each equation by taking square roots. So here, what you're going to do, and don't panic. A couple people panicked. When you have a 16k squared equals 64, in order to get k squared all by itself, what do I do?
You have to subtract or add.
In this case, I'm going to divide on number 47. Right. And what am I going to divide?
16.
You are going to divide 16 because if you're trying to isolate the k squared, what is being done to the k squared right now? It's being multiplied by 16. So the reverse operation or reciprocal operation of multiplication is division. So you're going to divide both sides by 16. And then now we have k squared equals 64 over 16. Well, we're going to take the square root of both of those. And when you take the square root of a fraction, you're actually taking the square root of the denominator and the square root of the numerator. And Lily, here comes that plus or minus thing again. Plus or minus Square root of, oh, you know what? Yo, look what they did. Check this out. I just saw something I could do. Well, let's see if it works this way. Square root of 64 is what?
8.
And the square root of 16 is what?
4.
Okay. So then I have plus or minus 8 over 4. What does that reduce to?
2.
That's it. So plus or minus 2. And they write it out like that. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Are
How
some
did you?
of these problems, will they be on the final?
What, love?
Are some of the problems that are on the packet, will they be on the final?
I don't think there's duplicates. I haven't checked closely though.
Okay.
But I don't think there's any duplicates. But like I say, I really didn't check that. But I can promise you the order and everything is exactly the same.
Okay.
So, like number 47, 48, 49, and 50 on the final are solving by taking square roots.
Okay.
You know, number 51, 52, 53, and 54 are finding the value of C that completes the square. So you would have to half it, square it, add it.
Okay, but they're not like the same problems, right? Like from the packet.
No, I don't think so. I don't think they're the same ones. You know, occasionally CUDA software is really weird about duplicating, but I don't think they are. But I haven't worked the final completely out. I'll probably sit and do that tomorrow and work out all of the problems.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Are we gonna have to graph on the final?
Was there any graphing on the review? I can't remember.
No.
There wasn't?
I don't think so.
No, then there won't be.
Yay.
The final is the final is exactly like this review. Absolutely
Okay.
no different. Like there's no surprises at all. I mean, it's like obviously the numbers, and I'm trying to compare the numbers because I pulled the other one up on my computer just to see. And thus far, I don't see any duplicate problems at all. But I just want to make sure that, like, okay, let's take a look at 36. Let's look at number 48. So we've got 36p squared equals 100. So you've got to divide both sides by 36 because you're undoing multiplication. So that's division. And when you get the square root of something, you take the square root of 100, which is what?
10.
10. And what's the square root? Well, I should have done this. Let me do this first. Square root. So P equals 10 over what's the square root of 6?
6.
36. It's 6. Sorry about that. So I've got that plus or minus thing. Oops. Cammie locked up on me for a second again. Plus or minus. Well, she's all the way locked up, so I have to reload it. Oh. But, well, and now it's slow as Christmas. Just make sure, I guess the primary thing that I want to say is make sure that if there's a number being multiplied by the, by the squared variable, make sure that you divide it. Does that make sense? Yeah,
yes.
My computer's completely locked up. I'm sorry, guys.
It's all right.
Yeah. Nothing happening. Let's see if it opened yet. Oh. Here we go. Just make sure that you're dividing that, because a lot of people were not. It's locked up again. A lot of people were not completely getting this P all by itself when on the test. And I want to make sure that you guys are doing that. Does that make sense?
Yes, and you're doing this on Thursday as well, right?
Yes, I am. So we got through about 4. Let's see. I was trying to get at least to 30 today, but I am doing it. What other areas would you all say that you want me to focus in on Thursday? Factoring?
Probably like the ones with the I forget what it's called. The ones.
Stop me.
Yes, with those right there.
The exponents.
Yes.
Okay. All right. We'll focus on exponents on Thursday. And then if you guys show up and then there are other people that want to hear the quadratic formula, I will start here. You guys just remind me. Is there something you would like to see, Riley, since you came today too, honey? Is there something more that you would like me to work on Thursday?
I think maybe the same as Lily.
The same as Lily?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just as a recap.
Okay. Are y'all both feeling pretty good about factoring?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Well, okay. So what I'll do is I'll go from exponents to factoring on Thursday.
Okay.
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 All right. Well, I'll let y'all go study for other tests if you need to, unless you want me to keep going. But we can meet back up Thursday, and if you need me to, I'll stay for an hour and a half on Thursday.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sound good? And actually, I put it on the calendar for 3:30. But if y'all need me earlier, I can show up earlier on Thursday also. So you just let me know what you need.
All right. Well, thank you.
Nope, no problem. Thank you for coming today and letting us get part of it done.
Yes.
Y'all are going to do great.
All right.
Thank
you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay.